Welcome to the Israel Answers series, connecting Israel, the Bible, and you. Join Susan Michael as she explores timely issues and current events from a scriptural perspective to equip the Christian world with a balanced and biblical response. Be sure to subscribe for future episodes, which will ignite your faith and bring the Bible to life in your everyday world. Now, let's join Susan with your Israel Answers.
Welcome to the Out of Zion podcast. I'm Shelley Neese, filling in for Dr. Susan Michael, and I have with us today a special guest, Dr. Dexter Van Zile. He is a research fellow at the Middle East Forum.
Hi, unfortunately, I'm not a doctor. I just got a master's degree, but that's close enough. We can say that I'm a doctor of Western civilization, all right? As opposed to being a doctor of the church. We're all right.
Am I allowed to give you an honorary doctorate
Well,
right here
actually,
and right
my
now?
great-grandfather got one from Trinity in Connecticut, and I've been waiting for my alma mater to give me an honorary doctorate,
Okay.
and I don't think it's coming,
I mean,
unfortunately.
in my opinion, you have your doctorate in Western Islamism.
All right.
Right? So for our audience, will you explain what is Western Islamism?
Okay.
How is that different than just Islam?
Okay.
Explain
All right.
explain the
And there are going to
breakdown.
be people who disagree with it, but the Middle East Forum is basically asserted since its founding as a result of the writings of Daniel Pipes, our founder, is that radical Islam is a problem, moderate Islam is a solution. And he's defined Islamism as essentially an ideology that erupted out of the early 20th century, largely in response to the collapse of the caliphate and the humiliation that Muslims endured as a result of the rise of the West. And essentially what people have tried to do is turn to create promote, and the way I put it is that they promote an ideology of Muslim male supremacism in the modern era that is completely contrary to the way people are expected to be able to live in the 21st century. And essentially what that means is that, essentially the medieval rules that were associated with Sharia people are now trying to apply in the 21st century. And it's not going to fly, and it's going to create a tremendous amount of controversy and conflict, and unfortunately, probably some violence in the years ahead as people basically try to impose this ideology, even on Western democracies. And we see that it's advanced quite substantially in places in Europe. In large, one of the things that you can see, Ayaan Hirsi Ali wrote about this, is that women are no longer safe in public areas in Europe when in fact they, just a few decades ago enjoyed a lot of rights and protections. And now, we see instances in which women are very badly treated, largely motivated by, abused by men from Muslim majority environments that think that it's okay to try to treat women badly and also do the same thing to Jews. And there are Islamist imams that are encouraging them to do these things. That's what we're dealing with. An ideology of Muslim male supremacism that people have been using historical Islamic scriptures and traditions and sources to justify, even as there's a growing number of people like Mustafa Akyol who are trying to basically update how the faith is practiced in the 21st century.
Are you of the opinion, so there's a lot of people that just feel like radical Islam has already taken over Europe, that Europe is already lost, but it's not too late for America. Do you think that that's true? Is it too late for Europe?
I don't know. I'm not going to pretend that things are good in places like England, France, and Belgium. And I think the real question at this point is that, and this is a question that we're going to have to ask, is what type of countries do Muslims want to live in when they come to the West? If they want to essentially replicate the circumstances that they fled from in the Middle East and in South Asia, well, then we're going to have a real fight on our hands. I think we're starting to see in places like, particularly in England, we're starting to see essentially a serious pushback on the part of the populace there in large part driven by the rape gang crisis. And I don't like using the word. I'd rather use the word grooming gang. Unfortunately, the grooming gang moniker is not accurate. These were rape gangs. These were men for rural Pakistan that essentially regarded British women as easy meat because that was the language. And and I think that controversy, I think, is going to cause an awful lot of people to wake up.
So there's a lot of Christians that are, well, and just Westerners in general, that are fearful of criticizing Islam at all, criticizing the spread of Islam at all in America, because they're worried about being called Islamophobic. They're worried about those labels. So how can Christians apply criticism when necessary, but to make that distinction?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to understand is that Christianity was subjected to ferocious criticism in the years after the Holocaust. Between 1914 and 1945, essentially Western civilization went through tremendous trauma, and it culminated in the Holocaust. And people said, look, we're going to have to rework how we practice our faith. Okay? The World Evangelical Alliance, they issued a statement condemning anti-Semitism. The Catholic Church issued the Second Vatican, Nostra Aetate during the Second Vatican Council. Essentially, Christians said, look, we have to really update and change how our faith is practiced. And that's one of the reasons why the ICEJ is around, because ultimately they don't want their faith to be used as a tool to justify oppression of the Jewish people. The question facing Muslims is whether or not they want their faith, which propounds the existence of a compassionate, loving, and merciful God, to be used as a tool of oppression to justify the oppression of non-Muslims and put Muslims in a position of dominance and supremacy over non-Muslims wherever they happen to be. And I think that's the dichotomy. I think that's really the issue. Once you say, look, you tell us that you worship a compassionate, loving, and merciful God, and yet we see these terrible acts of violence perpetrated in the name of your faith, that we don't accept that. There's a contradiction here, and what are you going to do about it? Doing that does not render you an Islamophobe. Okay? It doesn't render you an Islamophobe any more than condemning Christian anti-Semitism makes you an anti-Christian bigot. It just doesn't. And I think Islamic leaders, Islamic religious and political leaders are going to have to get used to the idea that their faith is going to be interrogated with the same ferocity that Christianity has been interrogated since the 1800s. You know, the Christians went through the higher criticism, okay? And I'm not sure that I like everything that came out of a higher criticism, but the interrogation is coming, the change is coming, and I think that we should be optimistic that there are going to be people within the Muslim world that are going to say it's time for a change, and we are the people who are going to have to take the lead. The role that non-Muslims can play is that we can basically speak ironically and yet at the same time forcefully about the threat of Islamism.
Mm-hmm. So Dexter, so many of us know you as the media analyst for probably 15 years. And now you're in the second career as a research fellow in something similar but different. So how do these two interests overlap? How do you see the media representing what's happening in the Middle East, wars in the Middle East, what's happening in Syria and Iran? Like, is the media scared to approach this when they seem so comfortable with criticizing Israel?
Well, you see, one of the reasons why people love to criticize Israel is that if you offend the Jewish community, you get a letter from the ADL, okay? And you get letters from people like me saying, oh, you got it wrong. If you offend Islamists or jihadists, you might get death threats, and they may actually drive you underground and force you to hire security the way that they did with Salman Rushdie, okay? And so I think that's really one of the things, is that intimidation works, and it affects how the media covers issues related to how Islamism affects the world. And it's frankly cowardice. And also they know their markets. Journalists know that an awful lot of people want a narrative that they can use to basically say, I'm on the right side of history. Okay? And the thing is that a lot of people embraced an anti-Zionist, anti-Israel narrative. So they would promote a narrative in which Israel was guilty of genocide, which is a fundamental, outrageous lie. But then when it comes time to talk about the Iranian regime's murder of thousands of people in the streets of Tehran and all of the major cities, well, if they were to tell that story, a lot of people would have to wonder, look, we were outraged when Israel defeated Hezbollah with the Pages. And Hezbollah was a proxy for Iran, which is now murdering its citizens. And if I pay too much attention to that narrative, I'm not going to be able to think of myself as being on the right side of history. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, as a journalist being, and I worked as a journalist, journalists being who they are, they know their market, and they know the story that their market wants to hear. And so they might actually soften or kind of downplay the outrageous things that the Iranian regime does because they don't want to alienate their market. That's I think, one of the factors. And the thing is that the story about what's going on in Iran is so complex because, like before, all of the Arab regimes regarded Iran as a dangerous rival, okay? And now all of a sudden, even right now, it's not so clear. Like they're not the threat that they used to be with the destruction of Hezbollah. Hamas has taken a beating, even though it hasn't been wiped out completely. And so the other Arab regimes are like saying, look, we don't need Israel and the United States to keep Iran on the back foot anymore, so we can go back to demonizing Israel. And I think that, and the Middle East Forum on just a few days ago on February 13th, we did a roundtable discussion about Saudi Arabia pivoting against Israel and the United States. Saudi Arabia was deathly afraid or worried about Iran getting the bomb. Now it doesn't look like Iran's going to get the bomb. So it's like, okay, we can now go back to beating up on Israel because that's what we do. And our efforts to modernize are not going as well. We're still dependent on oil. And so one of the things that I want to say, and I think that Christians should understand, is that the Israeli Jews who were killed on October 7th, mm-hmm. They were martyrs to the cause of Arab modernity, because the United Arab Emirates said, look, we're tired of this. We're going to come up with the Abraham Accords. And Iran and Hamas said, look, we can't let that happen. We can't let the region achieve peace with Israel because that's going to leave us behind, because we cannot adapt to the modern world. The UAE wants to go into the future. They want a new world for themselves. Look, they worked with Israel to send a probe to Mars. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's modernity. They've abandoned hostility towards Israel as a unifying political agenda. But the thing is that the other countries, they can't live up to that challenge in large part because that's going to require allowing their people agency. That's going to require allowing their people and educating their people and bringing them into the modern world. And that's going to require them to take on the Islamists in their countries as well. Mm-hmm. And that's not something they want to do. So they're going to go back to the old order of things, which is beating up on Israel, which is why the ICEJ is so important.
It is amazing. I find it so fascinating that during the Gaza war, the media was more than happy to report the death numbers that Hamas was feeding it. And now what's happening in Iran, the media is saying they can't report on it because they can't verify the numbers of dead. And so just even the hypocrisy that's embedded within those two discrepancies is super shocking to me.
Right. And a lot of it has to do with the notion that Israel is a settler colonialist nation. One of the things that I saw early on in my career, and it took me a while to figure it out, is that the same methods that were used to demonize Israel are now have been applied to the West and for a long time. Okay? Mm-hmm. And they were deployed to delegitimize the United States, in the United States and Western democracies in general. We're all settler colonialists. We're all evil. And the thing is that the people in the Middle East were victims of that. Now, if you want to talk to me about a settler colonialist ideology, Islamism is it, okay? Take a look at Islamism, but they don't want to talk about that largely because they have viewed those folks as members of the oppressed third world, and they were the people that they could stand up for. Mm-hmm. And now to suggest that, well, look, you had it wrong all along, that's a difficult thing for them to have to accept. And so that's why the Gaza genocide narrative, it was like a shot of, forgive me, but it's like heroin for these folks. Forgive me, I know yes. It was like, that was exactly the shot in the arm that they needed to basically get the high that they were looking for. We're on the right side of history. Israel is evil. And by the way, they're not the victims of a genocide, but they're the perpetrators of a genocide. Mm-hmm. The high that gives to somebody is just, I suspect that would be phenomenal for them. And that's why we saw college campuses being upended. The people who were funding Students for Justice in Palestine, they knew exactly what they were doing. They were like, we're going to take these young kids who are addicted to notions of moral and ethical superiority, give them the stuff that they need. They were like drug dealers in many respects. And the thing is that if you don't have a Christian faith to basically keep you away from that stuff, if you don't have a worldview that says, look, you got to look at the world for what it is, you're vulnerable to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Dexter, so you don't have the normal profile maybe of most pro-Israel evangelical Christians. You have a Catholic. Yeah. You're Catholic.
All right.
So tell us your story.
All right. This is the way it was. And a lot of it, once I did this work and I started doing this work, and one of the things that I would tell evangelical audiences is, okay, I'm a former liberal Protestant who converted to Catholicism, who works for a Jewish organization. It speaks to evangelical audiences about the mistreatment of Christians, Orthodox and Catholic Christians in Muslim-majority countries. And it would make my head spin. And I was speaking at one evangelical school, and I said, I know that there's a theological difference between the Orthodox and Catholic Christians who are suffering in the Middle East and the evangelicals that are advocating for them. There's huge theological divides. And she said to me, and I can't remember her name, she said, tell them that they're dying for the name of Christ. Mm. And the thing is that one of the things that I have discovered is that for me, this is going to sound, as a former liberal Protestant, I'm going to tell you that the evangelicals in the United States are the greatest defenders of modern Western civilization than largely any other community I've met, okay? And to equate or connect evangelicalism with modernity, for a lot of people say, oh, that's not true. But in fact, it's true, because who are the people that helped bring about the Abraham Accords but American evangelicals? And the Abraham Accords were, as I've said before, they were a step into modernity for people in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that because everybody is still watching, Inherit the Wind, they think that all evangelicals are basically anti-modernist, anti-intellectuals. Mm-hmm. They're so used to thinking that, they don't understand that when they support Israel and when they support the Abraham Accords, they're not only acting out their biblical commitments, but they're also essentially becoming a great force for modernity. Mm-hmm. And that's really, and the thing is that, as a Roman Catholic, and I don't want to get into the whole theological differences from it, but when I talk to people in the Catholic Church, a lot of them understand that their allies are essentially in the evangelical community. They may have some theological differences, And the question at this point is that, can we work? There was a book written many years ago called Protestant Catholic Jew. Okay. And now the question is, can American society, and that detailed the consensus about how American society was going to address its challenges post World War II, or even right before World War II. Now the question is going to be Protestant, Catholic, Jew, Muslim, Hindu, maybe atheist. And the thing is that the evangelicals that I've worked with and talked with, they are capable, I think, of dealing with that. They are capable of helping to bring that about. Charlie Kirk, he talked to people in a manner that was very open. He was not hostile. He was not a caricature of Inherit the Wind. He was not an Elmer Gantry. And I think that was one of the reasons why they attacked him so aggressively, was because they could not tolerate the notion that evangelicalism could adapt to modernity and was actually a force for good in the modern world. They couldn't accept that.
Well, Dexter, from this evangelical
right.
to my Catholic ally friend,
All right.
thank you so much for the
Thanks
work
for
that
having
you
me.
do. And please just continue to keep writing and researching and sharing your
I know I
ideas.
will. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being
you.
on Out of Zion
All right.
podcast.
Thank you. All right.
Hey, just give me one more minute. I want to offer you one of our free resources. We have wonderful resources in our show notes. And if you go to our website at icejusa.org/show notes, you'll find links for a number of our free offers. We have downloadables to help root you in Scripture, help you to understand the issues surrounding Israel and the importance of Christian support for Israel. And don't forget, please follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and stay connected. Thank you, and God bless.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Out of Zion with Susan Michael. Be sure to subscribe to Out of Zion now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Pray.com, Salem One Place, Salem Life Audio. Out of Zion with Susan Michael is a production of ICEJ USA, all rights reserved.